Welcome to the GSMC Car Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey through the automotive world. We talk about the latest news, from new makes and models to new technology to all of the must-have options available. Whether you're a fan of the old classics, love the latest models and technology, or have never met a vehicle you didn't want to work on, the GSMC Car Podcast has something for every car enthusiast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Car Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, David Lucy Mabel. So, today we are going to be discussing Ford's relaunch after a 25-year hiatus of the Ford Bronco. The year is 2020, and Ford seems to think that this is the opportune time to bring out the new Ford Bronco Sport and the Ford Bronco full-size version for the 2021 model year. So in this podcast, we are going to be talking about the 2021 Ford Bronco, the demographics, who's going to buy it, and what sorts of car culture can we see arising from this reintroduction. We're going to talk about the long and storied history of the Ford Bronco. And last but not least, in the last section of this broadcast, stay tuned, you will hear what I think of the Ford Bronco and why I think Chrysler and Jeep should be very afraid. So, let's begin. The 2021 Ford Bronco. Right now, we know that the Ford Bronco is going to be offered in three different styles. The compact Bronco Sport, which is based on the current Ford Escape's architecture, and will be offering the same engines and drivetrain as the Ford Escape, albeit in a more rugged fashion. And the full-size Bronco will be offered in a 2-door variant and a 4-door variant. Let's talk specs. I know all of you out there, you car enthusiasts, you off-roading guys, you all are all dying to know what the Ford Bronco will perform like and what the off-road specifications are like. So, let's dive in. First off, let's address the elephant in the room. No, the Ford Bronco does not come with an 8-cylinder engine. I know this is disappointing to many of us purists out there. And it's really reflective of the times. When you look and see that even the F-150 is not offered with a V8 anymore, you can see that the V8 is really making its way out of the American automobile scene. Nowadays, off the top of my head, I could tell you that the only vehicles offered brand new from the factory in America that have a V8 engine are probably the Chrysler Hellcat series, either in the Dodge Demon or the Dodge Challenger Hellcat or the Dodge Charger Hellcat, maybe the Jeep Trailhawk, if they still make it, and any Cadillac V-Series with the Blackwing V8 that Cadillac came out with a few years ago. So those are really the only 8-cylinder cars and trucks that you can find really in America anymore. And of course, Chevy might still be offering them, GM might still be offering them in the GMC and whatnot. But as far as the Bronco is not going to have an 8-cylinder engine. I am sorry, folks. The two engine choices that we do have, however, will be an inline 4-cylinder making 270 horsepower, which I anticipate will be sufficient. Maybe not super fast, but then again, it is an SUV. It is meant for off-road use, so it doesn't need to be very fast. It's not a Ferrari. It's not even a Mustang, so we don't have to worry about it being super fast. And the V6 with 310 horsepower, for those of you who are looking to get an extra 40 horsepower, an extra bit of oomph, as they say. Ford also says that the Bronco will have a hybrid variant at some point as well in the future. This I don't anticipate is going to sell as well as the 4-cylinder model or the 6-cylinder model. This is probably more for people who are looking for the rugged look of the Bronco, but not exactly the off-road capability or the power that they're going to be receiving from a more traditional powertrain, such as the 4-cylinder or the 6-cylinder. Now get this. Ford is going to offer the Bronco with a manual transmission. That is right, folks. A manual transmission. Think of the last time an automaker in America offered something with a manual transmission. Maybe the Ford Mustang, and even the Mustangs, I believe, for the newest generation are doing away with the manual transmission. So that is very exciting news. However, there is a catch. The manual transmission is only going to be mated to the 4-cylinder 270 horsepower engine, meaning if you opt for the 6-cylinder, you unfortunately cannot get the manual transmission. This might cause some people to gripe. I'm not saying that their gripes aren't justified. However, let's just be thankful that Ford is even offering a manual to begin with, because frankly, the manual is making its way out much like the V8 engine. I anticipate that some people, nonetheless, will still be upset, but we ought to be thankful, just like I just said. So the Bronco, when it comes to off-roading, will be the real deal. Standard 4x4 with an optional all-wheel drive, locking front and rear differentials, and maximum ground clearance of 11.6 inches. And the seriously impressive ability to ford up to 33.5 inches of water. That is almost 3 whole feet of water, folks. 3 whole feet. Imagine taking a yardstick to a pool and then having it completely submerged. That is exactly what the Ford Bronco, standard from the factory, will be able to do. This is not including lift kits that people are inevitably going to put on there. This is not including larger tires or larger anything. This is straight from the factory, right out of Detroit. This is exactly what the Ford Bronco wants to do. It means business, and I believe that Jeep should be very, very afraid. As of now, there aren't any fuel economy ratings for any of the Bronco's variants. I personally believe that the people who are going to be buying this won't really care what the EPA has to say anyway. They're going to worry about the off-road capability and the fact that Bronco is basically the cooler, more special variant of Chrysler's aging Jeep Wrangler. Honestly, I don't think they're going to care much about gas mileage. Gas mileage for people who are going to be having the Bronco is more of a trivial issue, if I may say. Now, I know I haven't said anything concerning interior comfort and configurability yet. Stay tuned for the segment in which we discuss the Wrangler versus Bronco. That will be the last segment where I give you my personal take and why I think that Jeep is getting a run for its money. You'll find out that the Bronco is a very formidable competitor, I will say. Now, let's talk styling. The Bronco looks tough. It's awesome. I think Doug DeMuro captured it perfectly during his video about the new Bronco. He said that it was not exactly old looking like the Wrangler, but not exactly new with a loose tribute to the old, such as Land Rover's new Defender. He said it was right in that sweet spot that you can still see the old, but it has a healthy design of the modern incorporated into it, which I believe that he hit the nail on the head. Ford, whoever designed this, deserves a round of applause. They did a great job. I mean, I'm not just saying that because it's new. When you look at the Ford Bronco, even the Bronco Sport, which is the smaller, less rugged variant, both are very handsome vehicles. I don't know of anybody who can really say that the Bronco is not an attractive vehicle. I mean, look at it. It's tough. It's rugged. It means business. And you can totally see that it's meant to kill the Jeep, or at least take a huge bite out of the Jeep profits. So, moving on to other things besides styling. I don't believe that it's a coincidence that the Ford Bronco has been designed with removable doors, a removable hardtop, an option for a soft top, and a general rugged persona. if I didn't say Ford Bronco, people might be thinking that I'm talking about the Jeep Wrangler, which I think is exactly what Ford wanted us to think. The Jeep Wrangler has been around for a long time, and you'll hear more about it later on in the podcast. It's been around for a very long time. And the Ford Bronco, I believe, is here to take a bite out of Jeep's market share. Honestly, Jeep quality has been going down since Chrysler took them over in the late 1980s, and now it's just getting to the point where I feel like Ford has said enough is enough. Too long has Chrysler been the dominating force in the off-road SUV market in America, so we're going to create something that is just as good, that is just as capable, and even more reliable, so we can take away from Jeep's market share. Now, here's the catch. According to Car and Driver's latest articles, the Bronco may not be available for off-the-lot purchase until 2022. That's right, a whole 2 years. To offer some consolation, however much consolation you may need if you're really torn up about this, one can put on a $100 deposit to reserve a Bronco with Ford or your local Ford dealership, but you're still looking at 18 months of waiting. That's a year and a half. Obviously, Ford didn't have a crystal ball to let them know that coronavirus would grip the country and would cause them to have to delay the unveiling of the new Ford Bronco until just last week. And now it's really not the greatest time to be introducing a new vehicle, but nonetheless, here it is. And we have the Ford Bronco. We know what it's going to be like, and I can say I'm excited. Now, I will say, however, despite the Bronco's long waiting list and potential for dealer markups, the new offering from Ford is competitively priced when compared to other vehicles in the segment. The Bronco starts at just under $30,000, and with fully optioned variants bearing a sticker price just shy of $61,000. My first reaction to the price is, wow, that's actually not that bad. For what the Bronco claims to offer, cool new design, amazing standard off-road capability, and Ford built tough reliability, I think the price is justified indeed. Let's take a look at the competitors. And no, I'm not just going to talk about the Wrangler this time. We're going to take a look at the offerings from Toyota, yes, and even Land Rover and Mercedes-Benz, and even Honda. Honda is getting in on the game too with the Passport. So, we will start with the Wrangler because this is Ford's biggest rival to the Bronco. Jeep's Wrangler starts at $28,295 and can go up to $40,000 with the 2021 Wrangler Rubicon. The Jeep is slightly cheaper starting out, but this pricing is fair and balanced, not outrageous by any means. The aging 4Runner from Toyota starts at $37,000 for the SR5 trim and tops out at an estimated $51,000 for the TRD Pro, which is the one you're going to want for off-roading anyway. The only reason why I'm including the Defender's pricing and the G-Wagon's pricing is because they are also in this off-road segment despite their luxury personas. The Defender starts at about $51,000 for the 110 and goes up to the 110X for $82,635. This is actually comparable to a well-optioned Bronco, believe it or not. And the iconic G-Wagon from Mercedes-Benz starts at a whopping $128,645, which is not only a mouthful, but is way out of the Bronco's price range. So people who are going to be considering a Bronco are not going to be the same type of people who are going to be considering a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, which is no surprise to any of us. Now, if you're looking at depreciation for those who may be looking to buy one used after they've been out for a bit, I'm not an expert. I have a feeling, however, that the Bronco may hold its value well, despite the fact that Ford will probably make a lot of these. Coming up after the break, we'll discuss the demographics of the buyers of the new Bronco. Who will buy it? What will they use it for? And will it have a cult following like the Broncos of old? Stay tuned to find out.
Are you a business owner? Someone interested in the latest news that might affect your business? Then check out the GSMC Business News Podcast, a show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. The GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
All right, welcome back. Before our short break, we talked about the overview of what we know so far about the new Bronco. We talked about specs, off-roading capabilities, style, and most of all, pricing and competitors. This part of the show will talk about demographics of the Bronco buyers, if I may call them that. Be sure to stay tuned for my personal take on the Bronco later on. You're not going to want to miss it. Now, I know for an almost fact that the Bronco will sell well in places with a prominent beach culture. My home state of Florida being one of the places. I anticipate that the beach bum crowd will be on the Bronco like white on rice. This is very evident as you see many of these so-called beach bums have Jeep Wranglers, other Jeep models that have been modded for off-road use. They a lot of times take off the doors and take off the roof for a nice open air experience. I believe, especially that the Bronco is able to do all of that the Bronco is going to take a serious chunk out of this crowd. And like I keep on saying, Chrysler needs to be afraid, and they need to be paying attention to what Ford is doing with the new Bronco. GM, on the other hand, they haven't done anything yet. So the Bronco will be a perfect alternative to the Jeep Wrangler for those who don't want to be sucked into Jeep culture. You know exactly what I mean. I need not go into the painful details. We all know that one guy or gal who has sold their soul to dump money into modding the living daylights out of their poor Jeep. Which brings me to my next point. Will the Bronco spark a new community of Bronco loyalists, just like the ever-growing Jeep community? I believe it will, and here's why. For better or for worse, Chrysler quality is atrocious. Just read the writing on the wall. Jeep has survived because of their iconic pedigree, not because they are terribly wonderful to drive or because they offer superior quality and reliability. People who want Jeeps want so because they're cool. Think about it. Nobody who's owned a Jeep Wrangler is ever going to tell you that, oh, this is the most reliable vehicle I've ever owned. Oh, it's super smooth on the highway. Oh, this is great. Oh, it's that. It's practically a Cadillac, blah, blah, blah. You're not going to hear that. People who buy Jeeps are the people who want to look cool, who want to fit into the Jeep culture, who like the persona that the Jeep gives off, and who also want to feel a sense of community with other Jeep owners. The Bronco, I believe, is going to be able to offer all of that, especially since there are holdouts from the last generation of the Bronco that ended in 1996. There are still loyalists out there who have been, holding on to the hopes that Ford will bring on the Bronco back, and here it is 25 years later. But I don't think that Chrysler is going to be able to keep up with the market that the Ford Bronco is going to spark as a result. Think of it. You've got a new and exciting SUV with still retro styling. It has removable doors, a removable roof, soft top is an option. It does everything that the Jeep Wrangler does, and it has Ford reliability to back it up. I know several people with Jeep Wranglers. I live in Florida. They're all over the place. All the time you're hearing that, oh, I have to take it to the shop, the axle did this, oh, I have to do that, or the lift kit's not working properly, blah, 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 gripe, gripe, gripe. I mean, they're always griping about their Jeeps, yet they love them. You will inevitably find some people from that crowd who are just simply tired, of their Jeeps breaking, who are tired of Chrysler reliability or lack thereof, and they will go to Ford. They will go to Ford and see that they can get exactly what they want with a reliable drivetrain, or at least a reputation of reliability. Chrysler hasn't had a reputation for quality, oh goodness, probably since the 1970s with the last real Imperial. I mean, the 80s, the K cars and Lee Iacocca, I mean, he saved the company from, near bankruptcy, and he came back, and Chrysler just started struggling, floundering. I mean, look at Chrysler today. Chrysler doesn't have any electric vehicle offerings. Chrysler doesn't have any vehicles with a hybrid drivetrain. Chrysler is still dumping money into muscle cars, even though muscle cars are going the way of the dodo. I mean, seriously, Chrysler, wake up and smell the coffee. The Bronco is here, and the Bronco is here to take the Jeep Wrangler off the market. If not off the market, at least knock it significantly down by doing everything better and by being more reliable. So I anticipate that the Bronco community will inevitably arise, will be made up of Bronco loyalist holdouts from the 1990s and before. But I really believe that, like I said, we will see former Jeep owners join the fold as well. These will be the Jeep owners who are looking for a better fit and finish than Jeep, and for those who are looking for better reliability in general. This, in turn, will spark a huge aftermarket for Bronco modifications. Like I said before, lift kits. Despite the already impressive ground clearance, you know better than I do that people are going to spend copious amounts of money to personalize and build their Broncos. Yes, just like the infamous Jeep crowd that I like to make fun of so much. Those who will opt for a Bronco Sport will be the half-hearted fans who don't want any serious off-roading specs. I suspect that these people will be the same people who will want a hybrid powertrain as well. I don't think there is any question about whether or not the current Bronco will have a cult following and a huge aftermarket. But is it enough to scare Chrysler and their Jeep cronies? It might not be so. As much as I like to take a dump on Chrysler reliability and Chrysler quality, we have to face the facts. The Bronco is coming back after a quarter-century hiatus. A lot happens in 25 years. You look at the past 25 years from Jeep. In 1996, there was still the Wrangler. The Wrangler got redesigned, and then I think got redesigned again in 2005. The Wrangler has been there in an unbroken line of pedigree and heritage since the old Willys CJ Jeep that came back way at the end of World War II in 1945. Listen to this. You see, the Jeep Wrangler has been in production continuously without skipping a beat, just like I said, since the 1987 model year, and before that, in the days of the Willys CJ since 1945. This is 3/4 of a century of Jeep pedigree, 75 years in the community of the Wrangler. In contrast with the Bronco's initial 30-year run from 66 to 96, and then a 25-year hiatus. The Wrangler has also a number of special editions that have been offered. Unless Ford does the right thing and comes out with a Bronco Raptor, they might not be able to take their hopeful bite out of the Chrysler market like they were hoping to. Their bite might actually turn into a nibble. And let me just explain this to you. When you look at the Ford Mustang, which I believe is comparable in its pedigree to the Jeep Wrangler, has a huge cult following, huge aftermarket parts, and just aftermarket community in general. The Ford Mustang was introduced in 1965, if I'm not mistaken. The Ford Mustang continued on really in an unbroken line of heritage, just like the Wrangler, up until the modern day. You had the first generation, you had the second generation Mustang II, which a lot of people don't really consider a real Mustang, but nonetheless Mustang. And then the Fox body Mustangs of the 80s and the early 90s. And then the mid 90s saw a change into a more modernized Mustang. And then 2005, the retro look came back. 2011, they came out with the current generation. So here we are, we're looking at the Mustang versus the Camaro from Chevy. The Camaro was introduced, I believe, in 1967 and ran until 1997. And for about 10 years, there was not really a competitor to the Mustang in the American market. The Mustang community just continued to soldier on, and then Chevy realized the mistake that they had made and then brought the Chevy Camaro back. Now, let's take this and talk about Ford's Bronco versus Chrysler's Jeep Wrangler. Ford's Bronco is coming into a market that is already saturated with the legacy of the Jeep Wrangler. As hopeful as I say that I am for the Ford Bronco, which I continue to believe, we also have a battle to face here. The Jeep Wrangler has a lot of history behind it. A lot of aftermarket, a lot of shops are dedicated to modifying these. There are several events, off-roading clubs, Facebook groups, you name it. Ford's Bronco, if there's anything like that, it's still holding on to vehicles that are at least 25 years old. Many are not even off-roading anymore. Some people, their Broncos have been through the works. I mean, they've been through the ringer several times. I mean, they're just not able to keep up with the way that we may think that they want to keep up. And these people in these groups are, yes, these Bronco holdouts, these Bronco loyalists. I mean, they may be great, but the reality is when the Bronco was discontinued, it wasn't even a Jeep Wrangler killer anymore. It was going for the Jeep Cherokee, in which the Jeep Cherokee had become more of a luxury offering. The Bronco had begun to lose its place. So, you have this SUV that was really great when it first came out, and then it progressively got larger, a bit more bloated, kind of lost its way, and then all of a sudden it's coming back in 2020. I mean, it's great that the Ford Motor Company is bringing back the Bronco, but at the same time, we have to realize that Ford is facing an uphill battle. It might be several years before Ford finally takes a bite out of Chrysler's Jeep, just like they've been wanting to. And you can see it in the specs. Ford is trying really hard. The Bronco comes with a standard towing capacity of 3,500 pounds, just like the Jeep Wrangler. Coincidence? I think not. Let's look at the styling. The styling is not so polarizing that people are going to think it's hideous. The styling is nice and classic based on the first generation Jeep Wrangler not the first generation Jeep Wrangler, I should say the first generation Bronco, which at the time competed against the Jeep CJ. I mean, you're looking at something that Ford is really trying for. But at the same time, you're going to get some Jeep people who this will embolden them. This will embolden them and say, oh, well, we see this counterfeit Jeep coming out from Ford, but, we're going to continue and we're going to continue with Chrysler and continue buying our Jeeps and continue modding them and lifting them. And we're going to show people who we really are. We are Jeep loyalists. I mean, you might get some people who leave, but if you've ever met a Jeep person, you will know what I am talking about. I mean, these people, like I said, they must have sold their souls to Chrysler or something. I mean, they are really loyal to their Jeeps, and they're not looking to get rid of them anytime soon. These people will keep these things no matter how unreliable they are, no matter how terrible they are, no matter how uncomfortable they are. They will keep them running till the cows come home. And it's going to take some really good marketing on Ford's part, which if we look at Ford, they have the Ford F-150 Raptor, which has been an absolute success. They are having Raptor versions of some of their other trucks. So I believe that if Ford, just like Doug DeMuro said, I'm not going to pretend like I'm saying this myself, just like Doug had mentioned, who is a very respectable car journalist in the car community. He had said that it would be whatever the word is, it would be wise for Ford to come out with a Raptor version of the Bronco, because the Raptor version of the Bronco is going to make the Bronco meaner. It's going to make the Bronco tougher. It's going to really, really offer an incentive for those Jeep people who the Jeep isn't really, it's tough, but it's not mean, fast, and tough, just like a Bronco would be, who is really going to bring those people away from the Jeep crowd into the Ford Bronco crowd to see what Ford has to offer with the Bronco. So, coming up after the break, the history of the legendary Ford Bronco, from humble beginnings to O.J. Simpson, a 25-year hiatus, and now a triumphant return. Also, stay tuned for the end, where I will give my honest opinion about the new Bronco and why Chrysler may have to pay more attention.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, folks. Just before the break, we discussed the market that the Bronco will be going into. We speculated who it would be popular with, how it will hold up against the well-established rival, the Jeep Wrangler, and other factors that may make it a bit more difficult than Ford is thinking to get really established in this market. The story of the beloved Bronco starts in the early 1960s. It was the brainchild of Donald N. Fry, who also conceived the Ford Mustang. Fry's vision for the Bronco was to make it an off-road vehicle for use by civilians, directly competing against the Jeep CJ5, which is the ancestor of today's Jeep Wrangler, and the International Harvester Scout. Lee Iacocca, yes, that Lee Iacocca, may he rest in peace, approved the final design in 1964, and production began in 1965 for the 1966 model year. This first-generation Bronco is beloved by the community of Bronco loyalists. This Bronco was built on a unique platform that was not shared with any other vehicle in the Ford Lincoln Mercury dynasty. This first-gen Bronco was offered in three body styles: a two-door closed-body wagon, a two-door pickup truck, or a doorless roadster, which I think is absolutely wonderful and is probably the coolest Bronco ever made. This would be the first and last generation of the Bronco to be offered as a roadster or a pickup truck. Now, for the second generation, for 1978, the Bronco grew in size and from now until 1996 would be based on a shortened version of the platform used under the Ford F-150. This second-generation Bronco would see a move away from competing against the CJ series from Jeep, but they now took on some of the big dogs, so to speak, such as the Chevy K5 Blazer, the Dodge Ram Charger, and the Jeep Cherokee. Just as a side note, for those of you confused as to why there are two Chrysler products on that list of competitors to the second-generation Bronco, the Ram Charger and the Cherokee, It's because this is the SJ Jeep Cherokee that came before the Chrysler days. Jeep at this time was owned by the now defunct automaker AMC. May they also rest in peace. Back to the Bronco. The second generation Bronco, despite being short-lived from 1978 to 1979, was very successful. It outsold the Ram Charger from Dodge and Chevy's K5 Blazer for the first time in Bronco history. This short second generation, with its new F-150 inspired construction, was the first generation of the Bronco to include such creature comforts such as air conditioning, a radio, and a tilt steering wheel. I mean, like, look at y'all. This was the late 1970s where most trucks didn't offer this thing, so it may sound silly by today's standards. Well, all cars come with that. This was top-of-the-line luxury, if you will, for the truck market back in the late 1970s, early 1980s. So Ford, I believe, was super proud of the fact that their Bronco had AC, a tilt steering wheel, and a radio. Third generation Bronco was offered from 1980 to 1986. Frankly, there isn't much to say about this generation of the Bronco. It was ever so slightly shorter and ever so slightly lighter and more efficient than the previous model, but it was still very much the same idea. A Ford F-150 inspired body with the fiberglass hardtop over the rear seats where the F-150's bed would have normally been. This generation was the first to be built in Australia, which I previously did not know about, so you do learn something new every day. And there it was marketed from March of 1981 to 1987. The fourth generation Bronco gained better aerodynamics and an updated, more modern look of the exterior and the interior. There was also a 25th anniversary edition offered for the 91 model year, as well as the top-of-the-line Eddie Bauer trim that was introduced in the third generation. The fifth generation Bronco soldiered on despite declining sales from 1992 to 1996. This generation Bronco would see a sudden spike in popularity from an unlikely source. And yes, this is exactly why I mentioned O.J. Simpson. You see, I have two words for you. O.J. Simpson. Yes, sirree. The infamous O.J. Simpson had a white Ford Bronco that he used in a police chase down LA's I-405 in 1994. I can still remember this video, obviously not in 1994, but growing up and just seeing the trial and seeing the video as evidence and seeing the white Ford Bronco tearing up the interstate with the cops chasing him. It wasn't a very high-speed chase because these were not fast vehicles, but it really gained, it really gained some sort of legendary status from the populace. It's as if though whenever someone is getting away from the police, you want them to be caught, but at the same time, part of you is kind of rooting for them. I feel like this is exactly what people were doing with O.J. Simpson in his white Ford Bronco. They were secretly rooting for him and secretly wanting a Ford Bronco so they can have some sort of, legendary persona to them, because this is the famous generation of the Ford Bronco that O.J. Simpson used. He owned it. Oh my gosh, this is evidence in the murder trial, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, but hey, just like they say, there is no such thing as bad press. All press is good press, no matter what they may say. So, we continue with, after that generation of the Ford Bronco, we also must mention that no history is complete without the mention of the Ford Centurion. The Bronco would heave its last in 1996, just as the Ford Centurion, as the Ford Motor Company made way for more family-oriented SUVs such as the Expedition and the Explorer. But don't hang your heads in sorrow just yet. See this. This is exactly what I mean by an aftermarket addition, an aftermarket for the Ford Bronco that may happen as a result of the 2020 model year. You see, in the fourth and fifth generations of the Ford Bronco, there was a company called the Centurion vehicles. No, not related in any way, shape, or form to the Buick Centurion. That was basically a convertible version of the LeSabre of the 70s and 80s. This is basically what we would call a coach maker in the luxury car world. This was a company that took the regular Ford Bronco from Ford and modified it and made it longer, made it with 4 doors instead, and had 3-row seating for 9 passengers. This was basically the Ford Excursion before there was a Ford Excursion, or for those of you who may not be familiar with the Ford Excursion, the Ford Expedition extended wheelbase before there was such a thing. Basically, what Centurion vehicles did, they took a regular Ford Bronco, they chopped the middle, extended it, and slapped in the 3rd row seats and called it a day. I mean, these today are exceedingly rare. I personally did not know about them until I joined some car groups on Facebook, and I saw some people sharing pictures of underappreciated survivors, and a Ford Centurion was one of them. Here am I thinking that it was a limited edition from the factory, but no, it was actually a separate coach builder that built these and that made them, in limited numbers, and that continued until 1996. And of course, it would behoove me to mention the 1982 to 1987, I believe, Ford Bronco 2. The Ford Bronco 2 was basically a compact SUV based on the Ranger platform, and it was replaced in the late 1980s, early 1990s by the Ford Explorer, which lives on today as a crossover SUV. So the reason why I want to mention that is because this Bronco 2 still receives some love from the Bronco community, and it also kind of reminds me of the Bronco Sport that's going to be based on the Escape platform. It shows that even with the Bronco, there can be spin-off models that gain some popularity, that maybe people who can't afford a full-size Bronco get a Bronco Sport, or back in those days, a Bronco 2. I mean, look, I believe it's very smart marketing from Ford to do something like that. Offer a different vehicle with the same persona as the larger, more expensive vehicle, and people may one day, who buy the lesser expensive vehicle, may one day look forward to owning the full-size Bronco that they couldn't afford at the time. So whatever that may be, I mean, I believe that Ford did a good job marketing that back in the day. And like I mentioned, the Ford Bronco 2, just like the Centurion, is not very common. They only made it for about 5 years, so it could be potentially a collector item one day. And speaking of collector car status, I mean, the Bronco is not exactly a classic vehicle just yet, at least the 5th generation Bronco. But when you look at it, I mean, it's 2020. The last Bronco before this relaunch was made in 1996. That was, believe it or not, 24 years ago. I know I sound really young by thinking that 24 years was a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, in the car world, 24 years was a long time ago. And it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, the Bronco is gaining popularity. Ford chose to bring it back just as the old ones were beginning to gain classic car status. According to the Classic Car Club of America, a car is considered a classic after it's turned 20, and from 20 to 25, it falls into that bracket of modern classic, and then from 25 years on, in states such as Florida, you can get an antique license plate on your car. I mean, when you really think of it, the new Bronco is gaining popularity because it is a new iteration of the old. It is a comeback, if you will. But the old Broncos, I mean the Broncos of old, the Broncos of history, the famous first generation Bronco that was aimed at the greats such as the International Harvester Scout, the Jeep CJ, I mean these Broncos are going up in value and gaining collector status. I mean, even in some of the car groups that I am on Facebook, you see the people love the Bronco. they love the Bronco. And I know I was saying that the Bronco doesn't have as much of a following or as much as a history as the Jeep Wrangler, but when you really think of it, the people who are lovers of the Bronco are really loyal. They are not only loyal, they are loyal to the very end. I would see a Jeep person going to Bronco before I see a Bronco person going to Jeep. I mean, the loyalty is real. The loyalty is there. The loyalty is tangible. You can see it in how people react. The people who do have those old Broncos, how well they take care of them. It's hard for you to find a Bronco in a really good shape, but when you do find it, you can see that it's not just in good shape, it's in excellent shape. I mean, just as any light truck, these vehicles have been abused over time. But following the relaunch, I believe that there will be a regained interest, a regained popularity, a regained cult following, if you will, from the older Broncos that may have been overlooked. I believe as a result, with the new Ford Bronco, older Broncos will begin to go up in value because you're going to get a younger generation who is like me, who is graduating from college with degrees, who are going for work, who are going for jobs. They're going to be looking for vehicles to have a little bit of fun in, and not just your regular daily drivers that got us through high school, that got us through college, but they're going to be looking for vehicles that they're going to be able to have a bit of fun, a bit of recreation, and the older Broncos might prove very appealing to these people, especially those who are looking for something that is a bit cheaper, something that is still just as capable, just as fun. These Broncos may begin to pop up on the road some more. You can see this with other SUVs. I mean, the Jeep Cherokees, the older, more boxy ones, I mean, they've recently regained in popularity with the rise of the SUV on the used market. I believe as a result of the new Ford Bronco, the older Ford Broncos will begin to gain more of a following too. Yes, these will be sort of the new crowd, the new fans, good weather fans, if you may even call them that. But they are fans nonetheless, and they will be generating sales, and they will be generating revenue for the Ford Motor Company. So after the break, the moment you have all been waiting for, my personal thoughts about the Ford Bronco and why I think Jeep better step up its game.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
Okay, welcome back, folks. I can finally tell you my opinion of the Ford Bronco. Okay, first of all, anybody who knows me knows I'm a luxury car guy. My first car was a 1998 Cadillac DeVille, affectionately named Caddy. After that car was totaled in a car wreck, I went out and bought a 1997 Cadillac DeVille. Broke high school student, didn't even have a job. My grandpa helped me pay for it, and with money that my dad had, and we bought it. I drove that second Cadillac for not even 2 years, a year and 8 months before it died, infamous North Star engine, but I love that car to death. I had a Honda Civic for 4 months. I swore that I would only have it for 6 months, and 4 months into it, it got totaled, and with the money that I made from the insurance, I bought a Buick Park Avenue Ultra. So I am a luxury guy through and through. Not German luxury, not foreign luxury, good old-fashioned American land yacht luxury. So I'm not one just to say that is really interested so much in SUVs or in off-roading. I've never been off-roading in my life. I mean, if you count the dirt roads that I've driven on in my Cadillac and in my Buick, I guess I've technically been off-roading, but I'm not really into the off-roading scene. But what I can say, however, is that someone like me who is not into the off-roading scene, I think the new Ford Bronco is actually a delight, because I have been known to be super critical of Chrysler, even with my friends, and I, at a point, refused to even work at a Chrysler dealership because I told myself I couldn't sell a Chrysler to someone because I wouldn't buy a Chrysler myself. So I've never been a huge fan of the Jeep Wrangler. I think it looks cool. I'm not blind. I have eyes. I see the retro design. I see why people are into it. I personally am not, but I like the Ford Bronco. And I'm not just saying that because it's a new vehicle. I'm not just saying that because it's, some sort of moral high ground because I think I'm better than the people who own Chryslers, but I genuinely like it. I mean, Ford has really been stepping up its game lately. And what I think is that Ford, just like I said, is offering a real alternative to the Jeep Wrangler. Because when you look at it, in the past, we've had several small, capable off-road SUVs that weren't as large as the Ford Expeditions, the Lincoln Navigators, the Cadillac Escalades, the Chevy Suburbans of the roads that, are big family haulers. But when you really think of it, the Ford Bronco is offering a realistic alternative to the Jeep Wrangler. Before, there was the Land Rover Defender that was super low in production for the North American market and super expensive. I mean, $70,000, $80,000 in today's money. That is way out of the price range of anybody looking for a Wrangler. I mean, you had the Toyota FJ Cruiser, but Toyota came out with it, and I think it lasted 5 years, and then it was gone. Nobody bought it. I mean, it's hard to find one. I suppose the people who like them appreciate them and actually own them, but I haven't seen one, and that's not a realistic alternative to the Jeep Wrangler because it was here, and as soon as it was here, it was gone. I mean, you've had, I think, some offerings from Nissan. I think the Nissan Xterra was an offering that I don't even know if it was necessarily aimed at the Jeep Wrangler, but there was an off-road variant of it, I think. I'm not sure. And you have an offering from Mercedes-Benz, but we know that the G-Wagon is prohibitively expensive. I mean, starting at over $100,000. I mean, with German technology, things are bound to go wrong. I mean, I take a dump on Chrysler quality, but Mercedes-Benz quality, I mean, they might have quality and nice materials, but reliability has been out the window for a long time now. So, and Chevy discontinued the K5 Blazer shortly after Ford discontinued the Bronco to make way for the Tahoe and the Suburban to take the place as the family SUVs, just as Ford did with the Expedition and the Explorer. So really, Ford is actually offering a real alternative to the Jeep Wrangler. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. I mean, I might not go out and buy one, but if I ever felt the need to go off-roading, I would totally do it in a Ford Bronco. And the reason why is that I know Ford reliability. I mean, I know Ford reliability. My dad, growing up, drove 2 Ford F-150s for his job. I mean, these things were practically bulletproof. My best friend, her stepdad has a Ford Expedition with 235,000 miles, and it's in near perfect condition. It's never left him stranded, never skipped a beat. I mean, that is Ford reliability. I mean, Ford F-250s, all the time you see these things with 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles on them. I mean, Ford knows how to build trucks. Ford cars, that's a different story, but the Bronco is going to be in the truck category. I have no doubt that the Bronco is going to be a reliable alternative to the Jeep Wrangler. And so that's what I like about it as far as just the persona of the Bronco itself. I like the pricing, and I'm going to tell you why. The pricing is not so cheap that people wouldn't take it seriously, but it is not so expensive that the people who actually want one aren't going to get one. And I'm not saying that cheap vehicles don't sell. Cheap vehicles do sell. But I believe that it is strategic on Ford's part, making it a tad bit more expensive than the Wrangler. Because think of this. Whenever we see something that's more expensive, we tend to think better quality. I don't know about most people out there, but when I see more expensive, I tend to think better quality, especially when it's just slightly more expensive, not ridiculously more expensive, because at that point you're just dealing with luxury, and nobody really wants luxury in off-roading. I mean, you get those weirdos who like the G-Wagon. I mean, sure, if you want to take your, $100,000 SUV off-roading where it's going to get scratched up and banged up, you do you. But I think, on a serious note, that the pricing for the Ford Bronco 2021 is perfect. It's not too low, it's not too high, and I believe that Chrysler is going to have a bit of trouble. I know I keep saying that over and over again, but I really believe that Chrysler is going to have a bit of trouble, because when you really look at it, Chrysler quality and reliability has been going down. And I know I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but it's even people who own the cars that are complaining about the quality. And you have some people who are loyal Chrysler customers. I mean, I know that sounds crazy. Why would anybody be loyal to Chrysler? But you get them. And these are the same people who are like, yeah, they don't make them like they used to. I mean, Chrysler tried a merger with Mercedes-Benz, with Daimler Chrysler. That didn't work. I mean, those Mercedes-Benz models from the Chrysler era had loads of electrical issues, and they cost copious amounts of money to fix. And then now Chrysler has merged with Fiat, and not to take a dump on Italian vehicles, but they're not known for their reliability. Fiat means fix it again, Tony, as they say in Italy. So, I mean, it's just unfortunate that Chrysler reliability has gotten to the point where it's almost the butt of many jokes in the car community. It's almost laughable how bad Chrysler quality has gotten. So the fact that Ford is able to come in with something reliable, something competitively priced, to actually take a chunk out of Chrysler's Jeep market, I think is very, very smart. And Chrysler and Ford might have a tussle coming up in the near future, seeing who can retain the loyalty of their people the most. I like the fact that the history is being revived. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Ford Thunderbird, but frankly, when Ford revived the Thunderbird for, I believe, the 2002 model year after it was gone from 97 to 2002, they didn't do it justice. I mean, that last retro offering from Ford left a bad taste in our mouths. It was lazy, it was large, it was floaty, it sat two people but had no sense of sportiness whatsoever. I mean, it looked cool, but that was about it. The interior was just hard plastics. It didn't feel like the Thunderbirds of old. It didn't feel like what people remembered the Thunderbird to be, a well-built, well-appointed personal luxury car. It just felt like a half-hearted attempt to revive a great brand, a great mark of the Ford Motor Company. And I fear for the Bronco in that sense. I'm glad that the history is being revived, but I don't know, maybe part of me is a purist. But I believe that the Ford Bronco is going to need to really deliver. I like the fact that Ford isn't rushing to get it into production, just like many other car companies have rushed to get things into production, and the quality is simply just not as good. I believe that Chrysler is not rushing the Jeep into production, but is falling into a sense of complacency. They're like, well, we're the only ones that are really a realistic option in this market, so I think we're just going to, anything's good enough. I mean, we can give the people, a bucket of bolts, a basket case, and they'll take it because that's the only thing that they can get. But Ford is saying enough is enough, and they're reviving the history, and I hope that Ford, with the new Bronco, can really live up to the hype that we've been seeing from the car community for, probably 4 or 5 years now. I believe the idea of a new Bronco, I remember coming out in 2016, and there was like a rendering photo of it, which actually doesn't look too terribly different from the one that we have now. But side note, I believe that with the revival of the brand or the Bronco name and the revival of the persona, I believe that Ford is going to have to live up to this, and I believe that Ford might actually be able to do a very good job with that. Aside from the styling, I think just to speak more about the Wrangler, people now have a better alternative, like I said, with the Ford Bronco. And I want to know, how long is Jeep going to rely on nostalgia and old design? I mean, face it, over its 75-year history, the CJ and the Wrangler, from the Willys Jeep to the newest, 2021 Wrangler Rubicon, I mean, they don't really look that different. I remember vividly the other day I was driving, I saw two Jeeps. One was, I believe, a 2016 model year generation, and the other one was the newest Jeep that came out in like 2019. And I saw it. I saw both of them, and I'm a trained eye, and they didn't look that different from each other. It was until one of them pulled up ahead, I was able to see the rear tail lights of both, and I realized which one was the newer one and which one was the older one. How long is Jeep going to be able to be milking the same design? I mean, I feel like the Jeep community will eventually get tired of it. I mean, they haven't gotten tired after 75 years, but I mean, they can only hold out for so long, especially now that there is a viable alternative on the market. I mean, Ford really has to take some serious consideration into keeping their design refreshed and really, really taking some serious consideration into taking a bite out of Chrysler's market share with the Jeep Wrangler. I'm not a doom and gloom preacher or podcaster in this sense, but I believe that the days of the Chrysler Motor Company are numbered, and I believe that the Jeep Wrangler may survive. It may not survive under Chrysler, or it may not survive if Chrysler is not quick to respond. I know that they said something about a Hemi V8 going into a Wrangler, but that was quickly overshadowed by the fact that Ford announced that they were coming out with the Bronco for the 2021 model year about 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, there you have it. I believe that is the rundown of the Ford Bronco. I mean, we discussed in this episode the specs of the 2021 Ford Bronco. We discussed the demographics, who we expect to be purchasing the new 2021 Ford Bronco. We discussed the different trim levels available, the Bronco Sport, which is a glorified Ford Escape with a more rugged body on top of it. We went over the Ford Bronco 2-door and the Ford Bronco 4-door. We went over the history of the Ford Bronco all the way from its humble beginnings with Daniel Fry in 1966 to the last Ford Bronco, the O.J. Simpson model, in 1996. And now we are here in 2020, patiently anticipating for the 2021 Bronco to be all over the roads of places such as Florida, California, and really all over the United States. So this has been David Lucy Mabel with this week's podcast on the new Ford Bronco. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Car Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review that really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you and have a good night.
You've been listening to the GSMC Car Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed today's episode.